Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's guest, Diane Gould, is very special. I'm so excited to have her on professional and personal levels. Diane is a licensed clinical social worker that specializes in serving autistic individuals, and she is the executive director and founder of PDA North America, and also founded the annual PDA North America conference held in Chicago that has changed hundreds of lives of PDA families. For those that don't know, PDA is Pathological Demand Avoidance, or as we prefer to call it, Persistent Drive for Autonomy. And Diane has also co-authored a book, Navigating PDA in America, with Ruth Fiedler, that was published in June 2024. Diane, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be included. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I met you finally in person at the PDA conference in DC not that long ago, and that was an amazing conference. It was. You know what it was? I'll tell you, not to go into it too much, but like it was just nice being in a room of everybody that gets it.
Totally.
So for our listeners that don't know what PDA is, give us a little nutshell of what PDA is.
Sure. For me, it helps to know the history. So PDA was kind of established by a psychologist in the UK who was diagnosing kid after kid as autistic. And she noticed this subgroup of kids who were different than the majority of kids she was diagnosing, but very much like each other. And what stood out to her was that they couldn't help avoiding everyday demands. And she named it pathological demand avoidance intentionally. We wish she hadn't, but intentionally, because she wanted people to know that these kids couldn't help it. And then she identified lots of characteristics that are shared besides kind of avoiding demands, this need for autonomy. PDA kids are very creative and imaginative. They often, and adults too, they often use social strategies to avoid demands. So they use a lot of camouflage, which is one of the reasons we need awareness of PDA, because often their needs aren't recognized. And what's really striking to me is that their autism isn't recognized. Many parents take their kids for assessments and are told that, oh, your son can't be autistic. He's so socially motivated.
Yeah.
Or your daughters can't be autistic because they're so imaginative, or oh, your child, they make eye contact, so they're not autistic, right? So everybody's struggling and not getting the understanding and support. Also, what is part of the presentation frequently is that PDAers act very differently in some situations and settings than they do in other situations. So how it plays out most frequently is a child holds it together and masks at school and then comes home and falls apart. And then when the parents report this to the school staff say or think, yeah, well, I think it's probably a family problem because he's an issue here, or a parenting problem. Because, right, your kids still, right? So there's that blame, there's mistrust. And often schools don't realize that the child is struggling until they stop going to school.
Right. And I know, in my experience with a lot of PDA, the other problem is that schools have a challenge understanding that academic impact does not mean bad grades or bad
Right.
test scores. And that's the problem, is that I can't tell you how many meetings, but what would the goals be? She's fine academically,
Right.
right?
Right.
Well, the goals would be the social
Right.
and
Or uh,
reduce anxiety.
right, the social, reducing anxiety, self-understanding, advocacy. I mean, I do think, like, it's funny to me that schools are willing to write advocacy goals, but the kids I know, they've been advocating their whole academic career. I don't want to do this. Leave me alone. Like, that's advocacy. We just don't like what they're saying.
Right.
So
Right. Exactly.
it's so complicated. And, because of interoception issues with autistic people, sometimes we don't even understand what we need. So how can we advocate for it? Or we don't even know what the possibilities are.
Right.
Especially like when kids go off to college, like it's a new situation. How could they self-advocate?
Right. And it's the same, but it's also the same for our kids in middle and high school. I mean, elementary, we know
Right.
definitely they're little, but they, like, what are the options? Because school
Totally.
is very like, this is this. And are there anything?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I attend lots of IEP and school meetings as part of my private practice, and it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some ways to support PDA students in school?
So in my head, it all makes sense, and it's not that hard. But I'm trying to be more empathetic that schools find it so hard. Um, it's generally all about relationships and trust and co-regulation. And that doesn't cost money, right? I mean,
Right.
to me, it's that partnering, collaboration, that I get you, I understand you. I'm going to keep your nervous system safe, because probably what's the most important thing to understand about autism and PDA, and I look at PDA as an autistic profile. Not everybody in the world does, but most of us do. But the most important thing to understand is that being autistic means you have a different kind of nervous system. And Donna Henderson, who's local to you guys, I think, talks a lot about that. And PDAers have an especially sensitive and reactive nervous system that easily goes into fight, flight, or freeze. So they need co-regulation. They need people to keep their nervous system feeling safe, and so they can be regulated. And sometimes I think schools forget maybe that you have to be emotionally regulated to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what we want for our kids, is learning, engagement. And it might look different than how it looks for other kids.
Yeah. And that's one thing I use often at IEP meetings, especially for eligibility, is that if they're not emotionally regulated, they're not available for learning. And
Right.
that's the academic impact. If
Absolutely.
they're masking all day and saying, I need to look like this student and be like this student,
Right.
they're not absorbing anything, because their brain is focused on what they need to be doing to fit in to standards, right?
Right, absolutely. And there's all those other things going on too, is just tolerating the environment from a sensory perspective, and the whole social piece, right? I mean, that can take 100% of someone's energy, or 110%.
Yeah. Yeah, to fit in socially. No, 100%. And it's the connection. It's interesting because that's definitely a conversation I've had with clients about, do we want to look at a change of placement
Right.
or not? Because if the child already has They're like, my daughter has a very amazing safe person. My daughter's in
Right.
5th grade. I've told the safe person she has to go to middle school. She thinks I'm joking. I'm going to find a way, you know, like she has that. But so there's no way I would have moved her this year, no
Right.
matter what happens, because she has her safe person that's amazing with her.
Yeah.
And having that kind of, it doesn't negate everything, all the other needs, but it's
Right.
just that huge need that she has.
It's the
It,
most important. It drives everything else.
right. And it's something
And
to consider.
right, right. And what happens so often, unfortunately, too, in our schools is that because of that aide or that person, the student's doing okay. So then the schools think, oh, the kid's doing okay. We can take away
Yes.
the person. That's
Right.
one of the many things that
Yeah.
is so hard.
Taking away anything on the IEP. Like, it just amazes me that people are like, oh, well, the kid's doing fine, so they don't need it anymore. No, the kid's doing fine because they have it.
Right,
That's
right,
like saying, right, like that's like saying a child in a wheelchair can get from A to B. Oh, they can do that now. They don't need the wheelchair anymore.
right. Yes,
And
it's
it just,
a
yeah,
bit mind-boggling to me.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. And I want to go back to like school refusal, because I know you said like the schools don't get it until the kid stops coming to school. Then what?
So I do want to say we're trying to change the language on that. Words are important and they're kind of extra important to me. So
Yeah.
I try to not have people use the word school refusal. It's really I put in our book like needs related non-attendance,
Yeah. Which
right?
makes
And
sense.
because it's not a safe place, so it's just a smart choice not to go. But also, what really surprised me when I started focusing on PDA kids is, oh my gosh, most of them just so want to go to school.
Yes.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
that surprised me, right? This is this like scary
Right.
place. It's not meeting your needs, and I'm like feeling so triggered about it. And they want to go to school.
Yeah.
Uh,
My 10-year-old has a complete meltdown. She had a fever of 101. I'm like, you cannot go to school. And she's like, but I want to. I'm
right,
like, yeah,
right. So, and that's
yeah,
another reason I don't like the term school refusal because it gives
right.
that
It's
impression, right?
not.
The kids are not wanting to go. They don't
Yeah,
want to do the work. They don't.
it's
So,
not. Yeah.
so I think like most things to answer your question, the key is in prevention and making it a safe place, a place that works before the emotional distress causes the child
Yeah.
not to be able to go. And it's hard for schools to be preventive and to
Yeah.
see, like, even though he looks okay, he's not okay.
Right.
What you see on the outside is not what's happening inside.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I've been focusing on so much in my own brain too is how going to school takes away from so many opportunities outside of school. Kids who want to have peer interaction but really are done when they come home, or even family life or activities and interests, like they're used up.
Right.
And they might have to spend the whole weekend just recovering from the week. So that's not a time to really engage in things that give you pleasure and grow because school's taking too big a toll.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, we call them mental health days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I like my daughter who loves going to school. If she gets up and she truly like, I can't do it,
Right.
she's not going. Like
Yeah.
if she decides to go later, great, fine. But if she like gets to that point, I don't want her to force her, and then it become the worst.
Right.
But
And in a perfect world, we'd have recovery time even before it gets that
right,
bad. that like,
Yeah.
oh, you've worked really hard, you've used, your spoons or whatever. Like, let's just take tomorrow and watch movies or something. But our system doesn't, our systems, because it's the same for adults, don't really take into consideration the need for recovery time.
Yeah.
And that makes it so hard. Because one of the biggest challenges for PDA students going to school is rigid start times and rigid attendance policies. And parents, as you know, are being reported for child neglect or truancy. And I say to parents, which maybe isn't always the most gentle, or understanding, is do not like pick up your kid, put him in the car and force them to go to school because the school is making you do that. Even if they want you to do it, then it's just not good for your relationship. It's not for anybody's in anybody's best interest.
Right, because it breaks, your parent is now not a safe person.
Right. And if schools pressure parents, sometimes that is what happens.
Yeah. And I say all the time, parents ask me, like, what do I do? And I'm like, as a lawyer, legally, I have to tell you to send your child to school.
Right.
As a parent, do what's best for your child.
Absolutely.
I say all the time for my child, like, her mental health is more important. Her self-esteem is more important. I don't care about the grades. I don't care about the reading and math. She'll get all that. She's bright.
Totally.
It's the first to learning, right?
Right.
But I need to keep her feeling good and confident and a strong, independent woman.
Right. And long-term, right, for her to understand what she needs to be okay.
Yeah.
And what I try to give permission to parents to do is not fall into any of those traditional parenting traps of, all right, you can stay home today, but you got to promise to go tomorrow. All those kind of things that we think we're supposed to do to be good parents. We've kind of all drank the Kool-Aid, and versus, hey, honey, whatever you need, like, this is what you need today. Who knows what you need tomorrow? Because the kids, they've adopted all those beliefs of shame too. Like, oh, let me say, tomorrow I'll go. Like, they want to please. They want people to be happy with them.
Yeah. And so I know for me, one of the things one of my clients had said that I was like, oh, that's brilliant, is to tell the child that if it gets to be too much in the school day, call me.
Yeah. So
give them an out, right?
Right. So that's something I have fought with schools and therapists about. And I have one, I had a PDA 18-year-old intern last summer, and she had said and taught me that when she was younger, she couldn't go to school because she felt that if she did, she'd be trapped and not be able to leave, right? So I just say that to schools all the time. You don't want a kid to feel trapped. I don't want them to have a big rigmarole and have to convince the nurse or the teacher. I want no questions asked. They need to leave, and often that means having their phone right next to them, that they can leave. And I've, had disagreements with therapists even on that. And I get it, like feeling trapped, it takes your oxygen away. And you certainly, like we said earlier, you certainly can't learn if you're worried about that.
Right.
And
exactly.
Isn't that what school should be about?
Right. And that's the challenge, is that people are like, no, they need to stay in school all day. If they're at the point that they need to go home, why? What are they learning? What are you forcing this child? They're not going to learn anything. They're at the point. They said, I need to self-regulate. I need to go home.
Right.
Why are we punishing them,
it makes them more likely to miss days.
Exactly.
And to have non-attendance needs, dependent non-attendant, because they're not going to be able to trust that they can go. It's not going to be a safe place. So why would we we give those messages. I also think we have, in part is our culture, and it's so deep, this whole mindset of like, work through it and, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's good for you to push through. And those messages are so harmful for neurodivergent students, where it needs to be, hey, learn about yourself, listen to your body and your emotions, and honor that. Right? Why isn't that the preferred method of thinking, the preferred approach?
Right. Accept yourself as you are,
Right.
and it's okay.
Yeah, without the guilt and shame. Like if it's somebody like, comes home because they thought they couldn't make it, and then comes to a parent and say, you know what, I'm feeling better. I probably could have. Like, just say, hey, it's so better to be safe than sorry. Like, and maybe you're better because you're home. Not like, all right, if you come home and no video games, because you're supposed to
Yeah.
be at school, no electronics.
Right.
It's
Right.
so
Because that's
easy to fall into those parenting traps.
well, because as parents, that's what we were told for so long
Totally.
of you need, and oh God, how many times did the school say, you need to make home less safe and less desirable, right? Like,
Yes, it's
I,
insane. It's insane. And the messages continue, right? They don't even
right,
just stop.
right,
They continue.
yeah,
And it's so hard for parents to not listen because, all of us parents, like, we live in fear of making mistakes. We don't want to
yeah,
screw up our kids. We don't want to, like, so it like plays on that vulnerability. Like, maybe not giving a consequence is gonna like create, a criminal, or
right,
all those fears, and the systems and parenting books and behaviorism, it all kind of plays on those fears.
right. And it's, like kids don't come with manuals. They,
Right.
especially not neurodiverse kids, like none of them do. And, we say all the time, you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child or adult even, because they're
Right.
so different. What works for one
Absolutely.
doesn't, yeah.
Right. And
Have
the
you,
key
yeah,
is helping them understand what works for them at a given moment, because it might be different than what they need tomorrow.
exactly. And just because they can today doesn't mean they can't tomorrow,
Right.
like, yep, we went over that stuff. But what, like, have you been able to, because I know it's a challenge for me, have you been able to convince schools, or do you have arguments for like flexible attendance?
Yeah, a lot, I think, it's the culture and the mindset of school administration. I think
Yeah.
the schools that are okay with it and the schools that aren't, it hasn't been because of my argument. It's been because of their belief system,
Yep.
um, too.
That
And
makes
and
sense.
sometimes schools will get it just from a pragmatic level. Like, really, like, if I said, would you rather have them there 3 periods in the afternoon or not at all? Like, doesn't that just make sense?
Right.
Um, but
Yeah.
it often does take pushing, and it also takes a little of understanding the whole picture
Yeah.
of the profile and the nervous system and the needs of a person. Um,
Yeah.
I also, sometimes also from a pragmatic viewpoint, if the morning at home is relaxed without that pressure, the child's going
Right.
to come more able to learn.
Right. Yeah.
But
So
schools
true.
schools are not always
Yeah.
capable.
And that's when, I mean, I usually say once conflicts arise, that's when you need to bring attorneys in. I mean, advocates are great to a point, but then there's that one level that like you need the attorney. But when it comes to the negotiating of um, flexible attendance or late and all of that, I usually say, don't bring an attorney. Don't bring me.
Right.
I'll be
And
in the background for you. But
yeah,
because the problem is legally, their legal department cannot allow them to
yes.
say, yes, you can come late.
Right. That's really good advice. And when you come,
Yeah.
an attorney comes, then the school has to have their attorney. One thing
Right.
that does help, uh, and all this took me like a long time to figure out after many mistakes, is so sometimes it's figuring out where the resistance comes from and what they need, because sometimes just a note from the pediatrician so they can file it wherever they need to file it can like bring down the temperature.
Yeah. Interesting. But they're not going to write it on an IEP. They will absolutely never write that they can excuse but on an IEP, but you can have that on which is frustrating because again, it's like if this is what the child needs, a shortened school day, then why don't we make it work? If it was for a physical reason,
Right.
there's no issue. They would figure it out. But for a mental health reason, unfortunately, schools don't.
Even though half these
Yeah.
kids that I know are like throwing up in the morning. It
Right.
feels pretty physical, you know,
Yeah.
or unable to eat, or just having all kinds of things. I mean, my hope is that more and more we're going to see schools be able to be more flexible. PDA North America, we've been working on this year, a school-based training program. We're hoping to launch in spring. I've been doing more school trainings and consultations, as you know, some of my colleagues have. And we're hopeful because I feel like, you know, in the last 5 years since 2020, I guess it's not 5 yet, but been focusing on PDA awareness. You know, I feel like we have such an opportunity in that we can kind of learn from struggles around the world for these kids and really push to prevent like the next generation of having the same struggles. But I'm trying to hold on to some optimism.
Yeah. No, it's there. I mean, because look, I mean, way back when ADHD wasn't, on IEPs and all of that wasn't considered, and anything social, pragmatics was absolutely not
Right.
a school issue. So there's hope. I'm with you. There's hope for the future, right?
I hope
Um,
so. Like one kid at a time, and you know, just through relationships, through flexibility, through mindset. I mean, I'm hoping. I am just hoping, and it's so much more than you know the lip service to
yeah,
the
yeah,
social emotional or even trauma informed, but it's really hard for schools to change. I mean, they do what they do because that's what they do. Like, then they've
yep,
done it that way. And I've worked in 14 schools in my career as a school social worker. It's hard. It's just really hard, and it
yeah.
takes you know I think the individuals working in the schools to bring about the change.
And that's why I left teaching. So I was in the classroom for 7 years and special ed coordinator for 2. And I was like, it's not about the kids anymore.
Right,
It could not be about the kids. And I was like, you know what? I can make so much more of a difference as a lawyer
right.
fighting and honestly, I do have to say that most of the time teachers appreciate because they know it's what the child needs, but
Totally.
unfortunately they can't always.
Yes. Yeah. Because a lot of these kids, when I used to do behavior assessments as part of my private practice during my stint as a BCBA, I got to do all kinds of creative behavioral assessments. And often I was going to recommend a one-on-one assistant. And almost, you know, I think 100% of the teachers I was talking to, they wanted that.
Yeah.
They knew they needed it. It would make their lives and the child's experience so much better. But, you know, they needed an outsider to ask.
Right. And
Um,
I say all the time that it's the principal's attitude towards special education that impacts everything. And, I've had people say, look, this school's not working. Where can I move? What school would be better? And the problem is like, yes, I can say right now, this
Yeah.
principal is more PDA friendly. This principal is not. But if it changes, you
Yeah.
never know what you're going to have. And you can't move every, couple of years. Well, I mean, some people I guess can, but it's not realistic,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's educate. Like that's, I feel like a lot of times at IEP meetings, I'm educating the school on what it is and what it's like and how they can help and how they can support. And to show like, one of the examples I give all the time about the masking is I say, think about you. You're in school all day as a teacher and you have to hold it together and you have to be totally together all day. What do you do when you get home when you've had a bad day? Have a glass of wine, go for a run, have a bottle of wine, whatever it is, you have that outlet. Our kids that are not feeling supported all day, what's their outlet?
Right.
That's why they're falling apart when they come home, because they're
Right.
safe. And
Right.
so that's worked a lot on eligibility, because teachers start going, oh yeah, I understand it. Like all of us mask to an extent. I mean, I don't want to take away from autism, but we do. I mean,
Absolutely.
you're at the office, like I'm in the courtroom. I can't, certain ways I don't think, say in a courtroom that I won't, certain meetings I won't. And we all have to conform with society.
Mhm.
And like, we need to look at our kids, especially our kids on the spectrum of like, what are they doing all day to conform with society?
Right. It's necessary and it takes a toll.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
that's, I know a big thing, like schools won't do the flexible attendance, but what I have been like some people call it flex pass, some people call it flash pass, but often that's one thing I can usually get, which again is giving our kid an out, that they have a pass that if they need to, they can just put it on their desk and go to their safe person or their safe space, whatever that may be.
but I have had schools that have done flexible attendance. And some kids can't do the pass. They need to be able to just leave when they leave because because when your nervous system is going into fight or flight, it's not possible many times to be able to use that upper part of your brain to like
Yes.
follow a direction. Like remember, like put the pass on your desk. So
That makes sense.
I'm big on one of like my other obsessive things, and I have many. This is what I do. I spend all day in my head, trying to figure things out. But one of the things I obsess on is, like the systems are based on not trusting the kids and
Yes.
feeling like they're going to do wrong or take advantage or be lazy or any of that. Where what I want for kids is to just be trusted, like assume they are going to do their best.
Yeah. I read somewhere once that a child is never going to become trustworthy until you learn to trust them,
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful.
right? Which makes sense,
It's
because
it's so true.
if they're yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get it so wrong,
Yeah. And
It's
I used to say to my dad all the time, yeah, you screwed up when we were kids, but you did the best you could with what you had, and I'm
right.
over it,
Yeah,
and moving forward. And that's I always say to my clients, to potential clients, to all parents and guardians and whatever your position is, like cut yourself some slack and give yourself grace,
totally.
because the decision you make now is with what the information you have now. And in 6 months, you might have different information and a different decision is right. That doesn't mean if you had that information 6 months ago, it would have been right.
Right.
And don't, like just take the information. It's trial and error
It
parenting a lot, right?
is. And at the same time, I think it's important for adults to take the responsibility
Yeah.
for making a classroom, an interaction work for the child? It's, you know, the IEP or a behavior plan to me is a roadmap for the adults, right? It's what
Right.
we're going to do to support the
Yep.
kid. It's not about the kid changing or making the kid change. Like,
Yep.
I feel like if the things like the problems, the student's not doing their work or classwork or homework, the solution is, or the question is, what are we going to do
Yep.
to make it more likely or more
Yep.
possible? But we have this tendency to put it on the kid. As
Right.
yeah. And as a therapist, I'm really clear with my clients, like any communication breakdown or anything, like it's on me. Like my job is to understand them.
Right.
That it's not like their mistake or their responsibility to get me to understand them.
Right.
Like, because
that's not the relationship.
Right. And we are, we're the ones in power, really. Unfortunately, we'd rather it be power with and not power over, but we have to take responsibility for what happens in the interaction and not blame the student. I mean, I'm triggered by so many things, including where it's like lack of motivation. How do we motivate the child? So I do want to mention, we're talking about PDA. One of the hardest parts of PDAers at school and including at home is PDAers don't respond to rewards and consequences. And those things can make life worse, not better. And our systems are all about rewards and consequences, whether it's an individual sticker chart or a class-wide behavior system. And it's just not good for these kids.
I'll tell you what works for mine that I know is making it a game. I bet you can't get dressed before I finish making breakfast.
Yep.
Boom. Other than that, it takes her 45 minutes,
Right.
And I just spaced on the other one. Oh, humor.
Right.
Humor.
Right. And
making a joke out of something.
Yeah.
Really?
Right.
You think you're going to be able to do that?
Because it diffuses
Yep.
all that tension and pressure and anxiety, and figuring out with each person what's going to work, and some things work short term, but you're just like kicking the can down the road. You're going to pay the price later.
Yeah.
So being really, really careful, because pressure increases anxiety.
And that's right. The reward system becomes pressure. Is now I have to do all this stuff to get this, you know what I mean? And it's just like, and if I don't, I'm going to mess up and I'm not going to, it just.
And the absence of getting that reward is a punishment.
Exactly. And in their brain, if they've done X, Y, and Z, even though it's not exactly what we thought it, and they don't get the reward, they've now, you've lost even more.
Right. Yeah. It's such a trap.
Yeah.
But it's so prevalent. It's how our school systems are built on rewards and consequences.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said about the IEP being a roadmap for the adults, because one of the goals that I see often is the child will use appropriate coping strategies. And I said, okay, who's going to teach them the coping strategies? That's technically the end that we want.
Right.
But what are we doing as the adults to get them to that point?
Right. Yes. And that's in almost every IEP I know.
Yeah, exactly. And so then I almost always get it changed to the child will work with a trusted adult to develop 3 coping strategies to use when, and then as measured by having less whatever, using the flash pass less, or.
Yeah, and it's hard too, because school staff are often surprised that in an office, the student can recite those coping strategies. But when they're provoked by a peer, they can't. And So I talk a lot about that knowledge has nothing to do with behavior. That,
Exactly.
I know over the weekend I should not be eating a vat of guacamole and a bag of tortilla chips. I
Right.
know that's not in my self-interest, but does it's not knowledge,
Right.
no, we drive too fast. We know that's
Mhm.
not a good idea. We're not making conscious choices like, oh, I'm going to increase my risk of death today. I mean, it's just part of the human experience, but we don't allow kids that same thing. It's totally different.
And that's a big one that I've seen as well, uh, that I've had with a lot of the kids. Um, when they get in that fight or flight mode, usually what comes out of their mouth is the most egregious thing they can think of,
Totally.
because that will get whoever's around them to leave them alone and get them out of
Absolutely.
that situation.
Yep.
And do they mean what they said? Are
Right.
they making that conscious
Right.
thought process of, I'm going to be mean and say these words? No. But
Right.
unfortunately, but they said that word, so they need to be punished,
Right.
you
I
know?
know. Yeah. I
Yeah.
am
That's
such
a
a
challenge.
that. Or right. Yeah.
And
Swearing.
it's
He needs to learn he's not allowed to swear. I'm like, he knows he's not supposed to swear.
right, exactly. So do I do it.
Right, exactly. That had nothing to do with what was happening.
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's
And
so
then
hard, and these kids need so much support, so much more support than they look like they need.
right, right, exactly. And it's, I say for us as the professionals, as the parents, as the family members, as all of it, is that we need to educate others
Yes,
and not listen to the naysayers
right.
and understand when you, I don't want to say a lost cause, but you know what I mean? Like some people have so much in their head that autism and PDA, it's not a real thing. It's not a DSM-5. It's not this, it's not that. There's no such thing. It's just, you know what? Like that person I just don't need to interact with anymore. They don't need to be part of my circle.
Yeah, no, I agree. And finding the people that do get it,
Right.
and there are those teachers around the country who get it,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
you know, who
And
find
that's
creative ways to support kids.
right. I was gonna say, like, I know because I'm watching the time and I know we need to wrap up soon. But like on PDA North America, you guys have the trusted, you have PDA affirming um, providers, and you have like amazing resources, great resources for everyone, that like explain it and work on it. I know something I'm working on that I promise I will have it out soon, is like I want to do a letter that parents can give to the school of like, this is who my kid is.
Oh, that's great.
And
That
I want to, yeah, and just kind of have like, here are different paragraphs that you could use and make it in a format that the parents can cut and paste and use what they need. Just to explain to the
wonderful.
schools, like, this is who my kid is. This is what they do. And, and this is why.
Right. And with all the families I talk to, I have them kind of just start a Word document and then just making bullets. This helps, this makes things worse. And
That
as
works.
they go through their day, like, oh, I have to remember when you say this to her, that never works that well. So putting that down, like, do not say
Right.
blank, blank, blank. And oh, but this works. And just like really start um, this document for the bus driver, for the lunch aide, for the teacher, for the
For the
babysitter.
babysitter, right?
Exactly. Just like start
It
giving
makes
all
sense.
this, and for some families, they've done it with their child, and it was a fabulous experience because it's all about self-understanding.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, that makes sense of like, this is what I need. And this is how, yeah, that totally makes sense. So I know we have PDA North America as the website, and we're going to have all the links.
thank you.
What is like? Do you have anything coming up? Like, do you have
So
another?
we've already launched the early bird ticket thing for our March conference. So we have that annual conference in Chicago, but there's a hybrid option and virtual option for different days. It's going to be amazing. Every year it gets bigger. I don't know why. I can't contain my thoughts, but it's going to be really great. And for families that come together, as you said, being in a room,
Yeah.
um, just with people who get it, and professionals get to meet other professionals. We have a lot of interaction experiences this year, so people can connect. Plus, lots of really interesting topics too. So on the PDA North America website, on the events page, we have information about the conference, because we have kind of low prices for the rest of the year. And then social media, we have all that kind of stuff. And then through my private practice, Diane Gould Therapy, I do consultations. I go to those IEP and 504 meetings with families who, not as an advocate, but just as a support and a PDA kind of knowledgeable person.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. As I said, personal level, professional level, and I'm hoping our audience got as much of it out of it as I did, of like, hey, there are people that will help you and support you.
Yeah, and everybody
you're not
needs
alone.
support, right? It's too hard to do alone.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is fun.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.